Hello and welcome. We're going to have a chat about Expeditions as Legends of Runeterra's second preview patch has just come out. My name is Julian Pastrytime. I'm joined by Legends of Runeterra enthusiast and rank 20 player David Phreak Turley.
That's true.
And we also have Paul Yeg Sottosanti joining us. You are the principal game designer on Expeditions, I believe.
That's true. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. So I guess the obvious question out of the way, what on earth is an expedition?
So an expedition is Legend of Runeterra's take on a limited game mode. And by limited, I mean that you are drafting cards from a random pool. It does not use your collection in any way. And then you're going to be battling other players and trying to go through what we call a trial and get 7 wins is sort of like the perfect trial, which will give you the best rewards.
So I want to know about card offerings, because I've played a lot of expeditions already so far. And it's not just like, pick your region, and then here's 3 random cards, and then here's 3 random cards. There's a lot more behind it. So like, what's the design of card offerings?
Yeah, so I mean, let's first talk about archetypes. So basically, the cards in Expeditions are separated into what we call archetypes, which is basically a list of cards that are synergistic with one another. They include a champion from each region that sort of headlines that archetype, and then so basically, when we are showing you packs, we show you bundles of cards that come from a specific archetype. And that starts out with the champion picks. So basically, first you're going to be given a choice of 3 different champions, each of which come from an archetype, and each of those will come from a different region as well. And then you'll pick one of those, and then for pick 2, you're going to be getting another selection of 3 champions, and we sort of choose which regions to show you based on what you chose from that first pick.
So for example, if I'm offered Fiora, she's often in like a Fiora barrier like buff deck. So you're gonna there's a good chance if I pick Fiora, I probably see Shen next round.
Yeah, so basically Fiora is from an archetype called Shield Wall, which is Fiora and Shen using a lot of barriers. So if you pick Fiora first, the Demacia side of Shield Wall, then we don't necessarily show you Shen next. It is a chance, and we do want those high moments to happen in Expeditions where suddenly everything comes together, you get exactly what you wanted. That is a possibility. But the thing that's guaranteed is that you're going to see an Ionia pack. We're going to show you an Ionia archetype helmed by an Ionian champion. And so if you really want to go down that Shield Wall path with Fiora, you can guarantee that you stay in the Demacia-Ionia combination, and then we'll see a bunch more barriers later on in the draft.
So I feel like there's lots of differences, like obviously the inspiration from other different limited archetypes in many other games are kind of apparent, but what are the kind of key differences in Expeditions versus the other ones? Because even something as simple as like, oh, I get to pick champions is very different from like, oh, I have a completely random pack that I'm just picking one card from. For
sure, yeah, a little bit. You hit on one of the differences is that we lead off with the champions and you sort of build your deck around those. Another big one is the fact that we actually have progression, which I think, as far as I know, is maybe a first in PvP draft experiences. So basically, the deck that you get at the end of the initial draft is not your final deck. It's actually going to improve over the course of the draft as you play games, and you actually get a little arc of your deck starts out. Maybe you made some mistakes in the initial draft. Maybe you want to take it in a different direction, and you can actually go in and use your rewards to sort of like change that deck and tweak it into sort of the perfect weapon for your final battle. Yeah, and the other difference is using 2 trials per expedition. So, and then also, instead of having the run be over after you lose 3 games, which is what a lot of our competitors do, we actually have it 2 in a row. You have to lose 2 games in a row. What that means is it's never over till it's over. Even when you lose, as long as you win that next game, you sort of erase that loss. We don't even show it to you because it's not important. The only things that matter are how many wins you have and whether you lost the last one.
So there's a couple things then to break down there, because there's the whole like progression model and everything else. But so you talked about your actual limited deck getting better over time, over the like, I guess up to 13 games you play, because you can lose, win up till you go 7 and 6 and get max rewards. So across the up to 13 games, or as little as 7 if you're really good, how does in what ways does your deck improve?
Yeah, so there are a couple ways. One is adding new champions to the deck. So we know that, if you play a lot of deck builder type games, you'll know that adding cards to your deck often isn't a good thing. It actually makes your deck less consistent, potentially less powerful. But what we found is that champions are so game defining and so powerful that adding a new champion to your deck is worth it. So 2 of the rewards you receive are going to be adding new champions to your deck, and then the other rewards are what we call trade picks, which we can get into more detail later, but that basically is a way to swap a card out from your deck that you don't want into a new card that either is more synergistic with your deck or just more powerful.
So I guess why arrive at like making archetypes matter? Because again, like you could have done lots of different things. You could just give people random cards. Was there like an emphasis from the design side of like, we want it to feel like you're doing the deck building process properly? Because not every limited game mode serves like the deck building fantasy of like, oh, I built a deck that actually like does something and feels like expressive to me.
Yeah, there are a few reasons. One is that it actually provides kind of a handhold into Constructed, especially because Legends of Runeterra isn't a game where you can just go in and buy hundreds of packs and have all the cards. Having a little bit of a way to test the waters and try out new decks that could be good and constructed through expeditions, that can inform where you spend your wild cards because you get a chance to see if you like the play pattern.
I feel like that's your experience and my experience when we first started playing expeditions.
Yeah. Just like copy stuff out.
For sure. And then the other thing is the champions. We really wanted Legends of Runeterra is about champions and about leveling them up. And so the way to allow you to level up your champions in expeditions is we built these archetypes around them so that you can guarantee that you have the appropriate cards, the synergistic cards, the support cards for a champion to be able to level it up even in a game of expeditions just like you do in Constructed.
So I'm actually very curious then about sort of more of the detailed design of archetypes, because as you mentioned, so right, if you draft Fiora, like you're likely to see Shen, you're likely to see Riposte, you're likely to see Barrier. Those are going to show more often than if you picked, say, Garen, in most cases. So what are some of the sort of like details in the design work of actually building out archetypes? Like what cards are in it? How often do you see them? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I can talk a little bit more about archetypes. So there are actually 23 archetypes in the current Expeditions experience. So there's 6 from the mono region archetypes. There's 15 covering all the duo region pairings. And then there's 2 bonus archetypes, which are sort of outside that structure. One of them is based around Poros, and one of them is based around summoning a giant mech piloted by a cat that's a 30-30 overwhelm, which you've probably seen if you've played the game.
That's my archetype, right?
It's a good archetype.
That one's called Cataclysm. It's great. It has 131 cards in it. That's very unusual. But the whole point of that deck is to play as many cards with eating games as possible. More often an archetype will have, say, 15 to 30 cards in it. There's basically always at least 5-ish commons from a region, 4-ish rares, and 2-ish epics. And then, again, we're trying to put synergistic cards in there. One thing to note is that like some archetypes are very, what we call linear in design, and that just means like they require the card, like they aren't good with other types of cards. They basically are only good with each other. So Shroom and Boom is what we call the Teemo mushroom archetype. That's just a classic example of that. Mushrooms aren't great if you're just kind of like throwing a couple of them into your opponent's deck, but they're amazing when you get a ton of them. So for that one, that's a much smaller archetype of only around 15 cards, which means that you see the same cards more often.
Right. You're going to see a lot of Wumps.
Exactly. You're going to see a lot of Wumps, a lot of Mushroom Clouds, a lot of, all types of Wumps. And then you'll get some Teemos, and it works great. And basically, when we first started out making the mode, we weren't sure if those sorts of archetypes were going to work in Limited, but we found in Expeditions, but we found that by varying the archetype sizes, we could really narrow in on certain archetypes playing very consistently. And that deck is good in Expeditions, which makes me very happy.
Because that actually makes it a balance lever then, right? Is like you can kind of like include or exclude chaff and like kind of ensure consistency so that, because in my mind, like Shrooms feels like a combo deck. It's like I have to survive long enough that you draw enough cards that Shrooms hit you, but I also put enough Shrooms in your deck that you die and say like, well, no, it's so concise that is going to be consistent because you're not offered a bunch of random crap that's not going to help you with the win condition.
Exactly. Yeah, I have had a number of decks in Expedition, so I didn't touch on this yet, but you can break both the region limit and the card copy limit from Constructed. And we can do that because, of course, in Constructed, whatever rules we have, people are going to exploit them to the fullest extent because you can put whatever cards you want in. In Expeditions, that's not the case. So I have had a number of decks, Shroom and Boom decks that have had 8 copies of Mushroom Cloud, 7 copies of Clump of Wumps, and so on, and they are super, super fun to play.
Can you get more than 3 champions?
You cannot, only because you start with 2 champions and you're adding 2 champions.
Okay, so there's a cap on how many you can get.
Yeah,
Right.
so basically you'll never have more than 4 champs. You could and often will have 3 of one and 1 of another. Or you can literally have 4 different ones, or you could have 2 and 2.
Question for you. I know in one of the internal builds, I was able to trade champs for champs. Is that still exist? Like, can I theoretically draft Fiora, Shen, Fiora, and then trade Shen for Fiora for number 4? Or is it not possible?
It is still possible.
Okay. So the 4, that's not even good. Like, but you know, the 4 train of your dream
But
is
you can do it.
technically
It'd be so
allowed.
sweet.
Yeah. Okay.
No, yeah, we found it's like pretty important to have like a release valve essentially, or if you do change your strategy midway through the draft, the sort of algorithm will notice that and say like, hey, Shen actually isn't very good in your deck. Like maybe you want this other card that actually, this other champion that probably is better. It will only ever offer a champion for a champion. We don't expect you to want to trade a champion up for
I want to change
spell.
Garen for Mushroom.
Exactly.
Like, that's not.
yeah, that's not going to happen. So yeah, we do allow that. And that is something we'll be watching going forward, but we think it's important to let people make those swaps.
That's cool.
So you said there are 23 archetypes currently. Is that the highest number of archetypes that were ever in the system? Or is there at one point many, many, many more? Like as a ballpark, I'm curious, like basically how many archetypes did not make it, at least for this version of Expeditions?
That's a really good question. We have not actually cut any archetypes that I can think of. The ones we tried worked out. We've talked about the potentially building new bonus archetypes in, and if players like find some new archetype that's like that is waiting there, the one that comes to mind is Yetis. Yetis is sort of supported in the Noxus Freljord bucket or archetype, or maybe in the Shadow Isles Freljord, but it's not really. So there could be a Yeti archetype eventually.
Yeah, I'd feel like that would work with Piltover Zahn with cloning program, right? Like you want to throw more Yetis into the deck, but that's what is that? That's like a very spell-based one. That's probably an Ezreal deck right now. The Piltover Zahn / Freljord.
Yeah, Piltover Zahn / Freljord is cloning program, right? Yeah, which actually is based on Elnux more than anything.
Oh, right, yeah, sorry. For some reason, my brain turned Yetis into Elnux, and I just forgot that was the way
I was
around.
just like, you're just a degenerate that wants all the Elnux and all the Yetis.
Yeah.
Which you totally can.
1 mana 5/5s are good. What do you mean?
Exactly, yeah. 1 mana 5/5s are good enough to copy them in your deck is great. You just don't get them for free also.
Yeah. Okay, there we go.
Well, we've kind of touched on it, but one of the other cool things about this that's different from Constructed is that you can actually, both mono is supported, but also tri-region is supported, which isn't something that you can do in Constructed for very good reasons. Why the decision to be able to add another region?
Yeah, so again, it's just because we think it creates more flexible decks. We think it creates cool combos that aren't possible in Constructed. If there is something degenerate, you can't always build it every time. You have to sort of get lucky to have the right regions offered. And I think things like that are good in Expeditions where we want there to be a lot of variance. We want it to be, I haven't talked about synergy and wild picks yet, but when we get to that, I'll talk about why wild picks allow you to get the same archetypes you've already been drafting, because we want there to be that 1 in a million draft where you just get to draft the same archetype the entire way through for every single pick. That's possible. It's very unlikely, but it's possible. So yeah, we want those sort of like high moments.
I know playing, like I feel like I've gone like Noxus plus Ionia, but then just like only drafted Noxus packs, and like slowly but surely given the chance to like trade Yasuo out for Darius, and like gone into mono Noxus before.
Yeah, you can actually trade. I have done that where I started in a duo region deck and then made it into a mono region deck by the end of the draft, or by the end of my run.
Yeah, because Allegiance is a really good keyword for those who don't know. It's like if the
yeah.
top deck is
That's
same
exactly
color,
why.
or sorry, same region, like I'm OP. So it's like Ionia gets to like summon 2 free 1-drops. There's like a 5/3 overwhelm in Noxus for 4. Like there's some really good stuff out
Somehow
there.
you have 5 of them. You're like, okay, like I can't lose. That's pretty.
Yeah.
Good.
The Basilisk Rare just got nerfed, I believe.
right.
Yeah,
Yes.
we just
6/3
announced that, but it's
6/4,
still quite good.
Yeah.
Very strong cards. So yeah, that's usually the reason, because I want to maximize my Allegiance cards, and we do try to allow that. Like the algorithm will tend to let you like swap out the remaining cards from that last region, especially if you have those Allegiance cards.
So we've mentioned like, okay, archetypes kind of craft the game experience for you. Not completely, right? You can't just force an archetype time and time again. But the idea is that like you're always presented with different deck building options, and you can kind of play like any little archetypes that you see and eventually latch onto the ones you like. So with that in mind, and you mentioned synergy versus wild, how does that play into this idea of like, we're giving you little nuggets of deck to try and build? Like first of all, what is synergy and wild?
No, great question. So like, synergy picks, so basically I said the first 2 picks are both champion picks. Your third pick, and then every odd pick thereafter throughout the rest of the draft, is a synergy pick. And synergy picks are pretty straightforward. They just mean the archetypes that you've drafted the most so far are guaranteed to be the ones that show up. So I think sometimes people think it's based on just what you picked in your champion picks. That's not true. It actually is based on every pick you've made so far. So you are able to pivot away from a champion. And if you pivot away hard enough, you actually stop seeing that champion's archetype show up in your synergy picks because you've picked 3 other archetypes more often than that one. So that's how a synergy pick works. Those are just basically intended to be, you're going to get what you're looking for. You're going to be happy. Those feel good. You're just like guaranteed to get things that work well with what you have. However, every even pick is a wild pick. And those are largely random. Sometimes within your regions. The way that works is I think pick 6 is the last time you can add a region to your deck. So after pick 6, if you haven't added a region, it's just not going to show up anymore. And then wild picks, right. So they'll show you random archetypes within the regions that you're in. And then there is a chance that you will see the archetypes from your synergy picks. That's what I was talking about around getting lucky. You can, so like wild picks don't outlaw seeing the archetypes that you want.
Yep.
And so you can
more
just
barriers basically.
Right. Okay. So yeah, like you're sort of rolling the dice, and then when it hits the archetypes that you're already drafting, you're very excited. But there's enough crossover between archetypes and enough generally good cards in the archetypes that we think you'll find good picks even if the archetypes you want don't show up. And a little bit that's what Expedition is all about, the make do of having to do with kind of the random cards you're dealt, essentially.
If it wasn't obvious for all the random, there's a hugely tailored design experience here to try and get you to play the decks you want to play.
For sure, a ton of work you've done to show specific cards within the set.
And that brings me to cohesiveness ratings, which is something we haven't talked about much yet. But so this is basically the idea is that, you know how I talked about archetypes being linear or not so linear. So Shroom and Boom, very, very linear.
Versus Cataclysm. Which is almost all the cards in the set.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a third of them.
Yeah, or like Suit Up is a good example, or like Relentless maybe. Basically, other archetypes are just generally good cards that do have synergies with one another, but are still good in other decks. Those ones are what we call low cohesiveness rating, and Shroom and Boom is a high cohesiveness rating. And what that means is basically as you're going through the draft, archetypes that have a high cohesiveness rating actually fall out of the pool as you move through the draft if you haven't drafted from them already. So even in your wild picks, Shroom and Boom will stop showing up fairly early on if you've never drafted from it before, because those cards are just not at all exciting to you. Yeah. Like you just don't want a Clump of Wumps or a Mushroom Cloud if your deck is all about something else, like all about, Fiora Shenberry or whatever.
Sure, right. But otherwise, you'll keep seeing like Senna or Relentless Pursuit or things like that because readying my attack is just valuable. Like I have units in my deck, so it's fine. Exactly.
Yeah. No, it's exactly how it works. And then we also have the ability to make certain archetypes show up more often in the wild picks. That's a tuning knob that we have if an archetype is struggling. So we tend to use that on the high cohesiveness ones. So when you are drafting Shroom and Boom, you will see Shroom and Boom show up in your wild picks a little more often. And that's just, again, you just really need a lot of Shroom and Boom cards for the deck to work. And so it allows us to go in and tweak an archetype to be stronger through just allowing you to get more synergistic cards when you draft it.
All right, so we talked a lot about the system itself. Now kind of moving forward to okay, I've drafted my deck, now what do I do? Well, you go play games with it, you make trades and kind of craft your deck through. But how did you decide on the specific system of win-losses? I understand that you want to add more losses to be more forgiving because it's not nearly as exciting to just pick up 3 random losses and have that be the rest of your run. I guess when you were designing, okay, now that I've built my deck, how do I play with it? What were the things that you had in mind when kind of going through the experience of actually playing with the cards?
Yeah, so like I said, we knew we wanted to have progression be a big part of it. We also nailed down eventually that a big part of that progression was going to be trading. So there's actually a trade pick at the end of the initial draft. Pick 15 is a trade pick, even before you've played any games. And that just sort of, what we found is that gives you the license a little bit to take a bundle of cards, like a 2-card pack that has a card you really want and a card you don't want as much, because there's a good chance you'll be able to trade it out even before you have to play a single game. But then, getting back to the 2 losses in a row, again, we just wanted to mix it up a little bit. We really like that idea of it's not over till it's over. That is also reflected in the fact that your rewards for an expedition are actually based on the results from 2 trials, not from 1. You'd go through 2 entire drafts, play all your games, and then you get rewarded based on your best result, which just gives you, the chance to sometimes play in a much lower stress sort of environment where you've already locked in your reward, and just gives you a second chance and lets you try some wacky strategies you might not be able to otherwise.
Or if you got unlucky, you get to try again and actually like get good rewards out.
Yeah, exactly. If you feel like you have the strongest deck ever, you go 0-2. Happens to us all.
Yep,
Happens to me every draft.
It happens.
and it can happen to go 0-4 and you can fail. It's very unlikely to get a 0-win expedition because of the 2 chances, but I'm sure it will happen to everyone's favorite streamer at some point, and the salt will be magnificent.
It's like 1 in 16, I think, is just if everyone's coin flip, it's like, well, unlucky sometimes. I'm actually very curious about progression overall, like on the meta layer, like my account layer, because like there's tokens or a shard cost or a coin cost to get in, and then like the question of like, is it worth my time? Is it worth my shards? Like if I'm doing well or not. So talk to me about the rewards you get from a limited run, from an expedition run.
Yeah, so we set the buy-in for an expedition at 4,000 shards or 400 coins, which if you've played yet or watched streams, you might recognize as the cost for purchasing a champion.
Yeah.
However, when you play an expedition, you are guaranteed, even if you get 0 wins, to get a random champion as your base reward. So essentially, when you join an expedition, you're giving up the choice to get any champion that you want for the chance to get much, much better rewards, depending on how well you do. So as you get more and more wins, you basically start collecting more shards. And shards are notable in that they can help fund your next expedition. And then you also start getting chest or a chest, which then upgrades as you get more wins. So I believe it starts at, after 1 win, I think you get a bronze chest. After 2, it upgrades to a silver chest. I think at 3 wins, it's a capsule. At 4 wins, it's a golden chest. And at 5 wins, it's a platinum chest, I believe.
Yeah, 6 is a diamond chest and 7 is a champ capsule. I've gotten 5, 6, and 7, so like unless they changed since a few days ago, like win 7 is for me was 4,000 shards in a champ capsule.
Exactly.
So it like fully rebought the expedition, and I got a champ and epic and a couple of rares and whatnot. So it was like super worth it in that regard, and I got to queue up again and take my second expedition.
Exactly. Yeah, but a champ capsule, for those who don't know, is a champion, an epic, and 3 rares. And then, as with any rewards in Legends of Runeterra, pretty much each of those individual cards has a chance to upgrade into either a wild card or into a card of a higher rarity. So the value for getting 7 wins is actually pretty insane. And you also, it's not that uncommon due to only needing 7 wins and also getting 2 chances at it. So I think when you're sort of like given a 50% win rate, I think it's around 15% to get 7 wins, maybe, or 17%, I think.
It's actually pretty good odds.
Yeah.
Just overall, like actually, I mean, triple or quadruple up on sort of what your buy-in was.
And another really interesting side effect of the way we've done things, as far as the 2 losses in a row, is that it's very sensitive to win rate. And by that I mean, if you can nudge your win rate up 5%, that dramatically increases your chance to get 7 wins, because the loss condition of 2 losses in a row just becomes much less likely the more your win rate goes down the course.
If you're a 60-40 player, it's 16% chance to double loss. So like odds are you're probably going to go pretty far and get a loss.
Yeah, to be fair, that doesn't count for your last win is the most important thing, because your 7th win is sudden death.
Yeah.
Was that just a choice to be like, it's kind of silly otherwise, or you wanted to make it more dramatic? Or...
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yes, it basically was super anticlimactic to get to the fact that when you're at 6 wins, you by definition don't have a loss because you just won. Then you're basically flipping 2 coins and you just need 1 heads. So 75% of the time you get to 7 wins, which feels good as a player, kind of. I mean, it's nice to, of course, lock in those better rewards, but I think the rewards wouldn't be as good if we lived in that world, because it would be a lot more guaranteed. And we just think that like we want it to be hype when you're watching someone play their 6-win match, and like having a loss to give makes it much less hype. And in addition, we haven't talked about the rewards for what you get when you get 6 wins. So basically, when you get to 6 wins, you get a trade pick, as with most of the time when you play a game, but then you also get bonus trade picks for every loss that you didn't get along the way.
Oh, right.
Which sounds strange.
So I'm gonna interject, because every game you play, win or loss, like certain wins, like you draft another champion and 2 cards along with it.
First and third win.
Right, yeah. Win 1 win for you, add a 3rd and 4th champion in your deck. Or win or loss, you get to trade a card out. So it essentially makes up for like, well, if you went 6 and 6, you got to trade a whole bunch. This is, well, if you went 6 and 0, here's your trades back.
Oh, I see. That makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really clever.
Yeah, you actually have fewer trades along the way. So basically, we want this to be the feeling of like rolling up your sleeves for the final boss and like really honing your deck to the most perfect it can be. And so if you go 6-0, you literally get 7 trades in a row, and it feels pretty amazing. It's like a little recognition.
You
of
really like tune that deck out, yeah.
Because we don't actually show the number of losses that you've accumulated on that screen at all. So the only sort of like reminder of that is that moment.
Right. And that's kind of nice that like your final boss deck, they went through the exact same like level of meta progression that you did.
Yeah, exactly. It guarantees that everyone's had the same number of trade picks for that final battle, and you're on even footing. And then, so yeah, I mean, we can talk about a little bit about matchmaking too. So
my next question.
Oh, cool.
Please go ahead. Matchmaking.
It came to mind.
Who can you match? Since you can add champs in the deck, it feels like a 4-champ deck stronger than a 2-champion deck.
You're not wrong.
Here's a softball.
Right. So, so basically, you only match against people who have the same number of champions in their deck. So there's a 0-win bracket, there's a 1 to 2-win bracket, there's a 3 to 5-win bracket, and then because of those extra trade picks and because you're in sudden death, you're rolling up your sleeves. It's the final battle. There is a 6-win bracket. We know that queue times will be a little longer there, but we think that's probably fine. Like once you get to 6 wins, you know this is your final battle. I think you're gonna be willing to wait a little longer to get a good match there.
I remember the first time I ever got to 6 wins and played my 7th, I realized that like, oh, I'm playing another 6-win person. And even though at the time it wasn't sudden death, I think I had a loss. And I remember the game experience being like, yeah, this actually feels really intense. So now it'll feel even more intense because I don't have a loss to give.
And you get to get someone else's rewards out of their hands.
Well, I got crushed. So, you know.
Happens.
Or
It happens.
hand them
He
their rewards on
just
some
crushed me.
platter.
I'm like, oh, okay. It's okay.
Comes in once in a while.
So that sounds amazing, reward system-wise. Why can't I do it all the time? Because I can only do a certain number of trials per week.
Yeah, so that just loops back to something we're trying to do at the top level of Legends of Runeterra is not allow people to get all the cards right away. That's sort of a larger conversation, but basically we think that having the meta develop a little slower, making the progression more meaningful, like that these are all interesting things, and not allowing people to spend hundreds of dollars on packs day one are all good for the game. And this is an extension of that philosophy where if you could spend hundreds of dollars to just, keep grinding expeditions over and over again, some people out there would do it and would sort of circumvent the sort of things we have in place, like only selling you a certain number of wild cards each week. And it's essentially, but then we also, if you really love the mode, want you to be able to keep playing. So we have this concept called free play, where you play for limited reward, so basically only for XP rewards. It's not quite the same as Constructs, I can talk about that in a second, but similar. But yeah, it's basically, yeah, you don't play, there's no buy-in, and you just get XP and no content rewards for open play.
So XP rewards for free play.
Yeah, so basically XP rewards, we still think Expeditions is more fun when there's stakes on the line, and when you're playing free play, that takes the form of XP. So the way we do that is we actually skim a little bit of XP from your post-game rewards versus constructed. So you'll actually get a little bit less XP as you go through your run from each game. And then when you get to the end, we give you this huge burst of XP, which feels really good based on how many wins you got. So if you get 7 wins, it used to be 2,000. It might even be higher than that now, but I'm not sure. But yeah, it's a big burst. And then it basically is the more wins you get, especially if you don't get losses along the way, it's a pretty efficient way of farming XP. If you go 7-0, it is probably 50% more efficient than constructed, for example. If you go 0, if you have 0 wins, it's about as efficient as constructed. So it's basically upside, just a very variable amount.
And to a certain extent, it like respects the time you spent drafting, since that sort of intrinsically isn't worth XP. It's just like a cost you kind of have to spend if you're like min-maxing time to XP.
Exactly.
But it goes beyond that because of the like 50% bonus.
Right. Yeah. If you want to get 7 wins, you probably have to think at least a little bit about the draft.
Right.
So,
You're not just like clicking the left one over and over again and getting a half decent deck.
Yep. So you're giving up some XP there. Yeah, we probably can't give you XP for drafting, but
That makes sense.
It like grades how well you're drafting. It's like, that was a good pick, 10 XP.
Plus
That's a win. Yeah.
All right, so the present sounds great. What about the future of Expeditions as a mode? Because as you've seen, there's a lot of different things and tweaks you can make, and obviously as the mode goes on and people play it and archetypes are discovered, like what are things we might be able to expect from Expeditions in the future?
Yeah, so we've hinted at, and I think perhaps even confirmed for set 2, that we will be adding regions to future sets of Legends of Runeterra, adding regions to the game. If you think about what that means for Expeditions, that means there's a whole bunch of new potential archetypes. There's 1 new mono archetype, and then if we add 1 more region, there would be 7 new duo archetypes. Right, yeah. Spoiler alert, we will be adding archetypes when we add regions. At least at first, Expeditions will take into account all of the regions that are available. As we go further and further down the line, say set 5 and 6 and beyond, who knows, we'll probably start rotating archetypes out. But But as we add regions at first, we'll definitely be adding archetypes to the pool. So the idea is like, there's just gonna be a ton of variety. You're gonna be playing against decks from all of Legends of Runeterra's history in a year or two from now, and those will all be viable to draft, and all will be balanced against each other to some extent. And so that's a big thing we're gonna do. We're definitely gonna do that as sets come out.
So, final question, and probably the most important one. We've all had a chance to play the mode a decent amount. What's your favorite archetypes? Phreak, what's yours?
I actually really love Enlightenment, which is, I think, Freljord Ionia. So Freljord has all the ramp. It has Wording Stones and Catalyst of Eon, so I get all the bonus mana. And then I get my 2-mana 6/6 lifesteal, or 2-mana 6/6 Overwhelm, 3-mana 6/6 lifesteal, Trinity round 5 or whatever. Pretty fun.
For sure.
I've gotten too many alpha wild calls to be happy with you.
A lot of alpha wild cards. That card gets offered a lot.
For me, geez, I mean, I've talked about it a lot today, but I mean, Truman Boom has to be it. I just love the idea of like pulling. I've always kind of been drawn to strange archetypes, like off kilter archetypes in other games. Mill is a good example. I love when there's a mill deck viable in a format, and so Mushrooms is about the closest parallel, I think. And I just love beating people through sort of strange combinations. So yeah,
I feel like more than 50% of Legends of Runeterra people I talk to are like, I love Elnix. I'm like, really? Why? These are the people making this game.
And then
Elnix.
I think my second would be Scrap Heap. Just the aggro, just crazy, go all out, discard your whole hand, and just see what you can make happen. Level up Jinx and kill him as quickly as you can.
It's Cataclysm.
Cataclysm.
I just want to cast the giant.
I also
every
love
time.
that one. Oh, we didn't talk about.
Oh, yeah.
That's true. We
have one.
This while we're here.
We have one unique card in Expeditions: Accelerated Pursuit instead of Pursuit of Perfection.
That's true. So yeah, a little bit of history there, and that kind of dovetails into talking a little bit more about other things that we tried and cut. But so yeah, we used to have a whole bunch of expedition only cards, and basically that was like some archetypes were struggling, and there just wasn't enough support for them in the set, and so we ended up just making our own cards for the mode and putting those in, and they worked really well. So much so that actually the set took a bunch of those cards and put them into constructed.
Out of the game anyway.
Yeah, because people were like, "Hey, this card's sweet. I can use it in expeditions. Why can't I put it in my deck?" And we're like, I guess, yeah, you should be able to."
Yeah.
So that was cool. Like a bunch of cards that I worked on got folded into the set, and yeah. So, but in there are cases where like a specific archetype needs help in a way that we can't do just by
offerings.
Yeah, by changing which cards in the archetype or whatever. So Pursuit of Perfection normally requires 20 cards of different names to be cast. There is another version of it in Expeditions called Accelerated Pursuit that requires 15 only. And that makes it quite the viable dream. Have you pulled it off in Expeditions yet? Yeah.
My first draft of the new system, the first game, I like very dramatically won by just getting to 15.
Amazing.
And I didn't even realize it got changed. And then someone was like, this card got buffed. I'm like, this card got buffed? What happened? And then I realized.
Yeah, so that's something we have in our back pocket. We could go back to that eventually if we think that there's another archetype that would really benefit from having either a different tuning for a card or a new card entirely, maybe. No current plans to do that, but it's definitely something we have the tech for.
Awesome. So I have to know,
Okay.
because we don't have time for everything. What was one thing that you tried that didn't make it, or is no longer with us?
That's hard. Okay, I'm going to do two really quickly.
Okay, that's
One was passives. So passives are, as you might guess, the idea that you get to pick between three sort of like always on abilities that just like start the game and play and just like make your deck better in some way. What we found is it doesn't work in PvP very well, because if I sit down and my passive is your unblocked units or unblocked allies get +1/+0 this round.
Yep.
And yours is start with double health total. I start with a super aggro thing, and you've got a thing which makes your health total much, much stronger. So I'm just like, why am I even playing this game? I'm not going to be able to win. And then the other was this concept of getting to choose your rewards. And we had this idea of plundering. So plunder would be that you actually take cards from the decks of the people you just played against. And that was like a choice for your rewards. We didn't actually take the cards from their deck, it just gave them to you.
Okay.
So the idea was like,
even worse.
I saw a sweet card, I'm going to go steal it.
Exactly. Yeah, the idea was like, we wanted to kind of feel like that, but it doesn't actually do that. But yeah, the idea would be if you play against someone who has an insane bomb, and you're like, ooh, that would be really good in my deck, you can plunder that card from them.
And it's gone. It's trade picks instead.
Yeah, we had trouble balancing it against, like the choices weren't super interesting because there's always one clear winner and so on. So.
Man, that sounds great. Again, so much to unpack here. Thank you so much, Paul, for talking to us, and thanks for hanging out as well. Expedition, certainly something I hope you all get your hands on and get a chance to try. As you've heard, the mode is significantly more complicated than you might expect, but hopefully we'll be back with more Legend of Runeterra content in the future. For now, it's just goodbye.